I cannot believe it. Congratulations to Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on being Super Bowl champions. And if you want to be a champion, you should go to www.NTTFGPOD.com and subscribe. I'm Rock.
And I'm Archie.
Well, our opinions, they might not matter to some, but...
What are you doing in there?
It's a podcast.
Immature, crass, trashy. And those are their good qualities. These poor schmucks are a couple of IQ points away from eating paste. But when it comes to music, sports, and comedy, well, that's all they know. You're listening to
Not These Two Fucking Guys.
Not These Two Fucking Guys podcast.
Archdog.
Yo.
We're going to talk about basketball for a moment.
Ooh.
So you may know him from Shark Tank, the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, Mr. Mark Cuban.
Absolutely.
Little eccentric.
Yeah. I like him on Shark Tank, and I think I don't know much of him, how he runs the Dallas Mavs, but go ahead.
Listen, let me tell you something. He's, by all accounts, a pretty good owner. He's like a player's owner, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So the Dallas Mavericks, so far in this short season in the NBA, have not played the national anthem.
Yes, okay.
At any home game.
Yeah, I don't agree with that, but all right.
Yeah, he said he thinks that many people feel it doesn't represent them, so he's not playing it.
I don't know about that one.
Listen, I've always been, and I feel like we don't ever try to get political or what have you, but no. You want to know why? We don't know shit.
Yeah, I know.
Let's have it out there. My thing is, you want to fucking, while I may not agree with it, you want to kneel for the national anthem, you want to lay down, you want to whatever. But like now we're not even playing the fucking national anthem. Like I feel like, to me, if you're a professional athlete, no matter what country you play in and for, like if I was a professional in Korea, I expect them to play the Korean national anthem. I'm going to stand at attention because that's the money that's the country that's paying me to do what I do. And I feel like him doing that is kind of like pandering to like people that are just against the U.S. And to me, that's just not what this country's about.
No, I agree with you, man. I'm not. That's our national anthem. Like, what the fuck? This is our. You want to know? All right. This is what scares me. What scares me is that when they start doing stuff like this, the next step is that we're not going to have an American flag anymore.
Yeah.
It's going to be more of like a neutral flag. You know, like more, you know, we're not red and white and blue. We're more like, you know, we're going to turn like gray and white. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
no, I do.
Just hypothetically speaking, but I'm saying that like we are getting so to a point where we had laws, rules, boundaries, and morals and ethics, and now they're all like the people are just like fuck that. They're bullshit.
Yeah,
they're bullshit. National anthem, your country, your pride in your country. I don't know. I you know, and to me, see, I'm always very biased with things. Like I don't hate him for that. Like I'm not a fuck that guy. No. But to me, I'm like I don't agree with it. I don't agree with that.
Correct. So the NBA has overruled him now.
Yeah, they did.
And we're like, well, you're going to play the national anthem.
Yeah. Now, I wonder if he was like, fuck you. No. Or if he was, no. No.
Yeah, it's...
Shut him down?
Yeah, listen, I don't... Again, I don't expect the national anthem to... People don't identify with it. Some people in the country. Okay. Not saying you have to, but that's what this country is. Again, if I was in another country, whether I believed, agreed, disagreed with their politics or how their country was run, if I'm a professional there, I'm going to respect their national anthem.
I can think of someone right off the bat that probably would not play at the Dallas Mavericks arena if there was a concert. I don't even know if they held concerts there. But I'm saying, like, Aaron Lewis would not would not affiliate with him, I think, after hearing something like that. That's how patriotic he is. But yeah,
see,
man.
Listen, again, we're getting way too political, but I feel like the more, and trust me, I am the opposite of like anti-establishment and like that kind of thing. But I feel like the more things that we like take away and take away and take away and take away, and before you know it, we have nothing, and then you're super fucking controlled, right?
Then you're turning into a communist country.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
I mean,
gonna
look at
happen.
this. Just and I'm not saying this make light of COVID. COVID is fucking terrible. It is real and it's terrible. Look how much our lives have changed in the past year, right? Restriction, right? So with restrictions and then taking things away and then worrying about every little individual's feeling. Everyone's different, right? Everyone's different. You cannot please
Absolutely.
everybody.
No.
But I feel like there has to be some kind of standard, for sanctioning bodies, whether it be sports, whether it be entertainment, what have you. I don't know, man. Like little stuff like this kind of it worries me a little bit. And then listen, I'm not saying I'm the biggest patriot in the world. It's kind of like what we grew up in and what the country was founded on, good, bad, or indifferent.
Absolutely. Sounds like you would have that stitched on your underwear for some reason.
Art, you ready for this one tonight?
Oh, I'm ready, bro.
Our guest tonight is a legend in the world of professional wrestling. He's done it all. He spent most of his career in WWF/WWE, the original ECW, just to name a few. He's a former world champion. He's a hardcore icon. Welcome to the Not These Two Fucking Guys podcast, Mr. Justin Credible. What's up, pal?
What's going on, guys? How are you?
How are you?
All right.
I'm doing great, man. I'm hanging in there in all this madness.
Yeah,
Family, everybody's good?
Yeah, everybody's good, man. Can't complain. Could be much worse.
Yeah, I hear you. Where are you at right now?
I'm in Connecticut right now.
Okay. We're in Jersey, not too far.
Oh, right on. Very cool. Very cool. Whereabouts in Jersey?
Kind of like by where where the Meadowlands is, like around that area.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
my in-laws are from Hazlitt.
Oh, nice.
So right off the Parkway there, exit 117.
117. It's funny how everybody in Jersey has to, that's the point. Where are you from? Oh, 153 off the Parkway.
Yep, that's how it is.
Yeah.
We appreciate you giving us some time. We wanted to check in with you and
absolutely.
see how things are going. What are you up to these days?
Man, I'm just, I'm just trying to stay out there. Wrestling. A lot of the bookings that me and many others had this year had been canceled. So it's been a nightmare for us financially, not just ourselves, but many others in the field of entertainment, sports, music, you name it. So it's been rough, but, trying to keep my head above water and, hopefully this stuff will end and we could get back out there because, just this weekend I had not this weekend and the weekend after, I had back-to-back shows, one in Detroit, Michigan, one in Daytona Beach, Florida. Both got canceled last minute because of COVID restrictions and new restrictions, I guess, in different areas. So it's just been crazy, and it's really rough going into the holidays with, limited income. It's not easy, bro. Not easy.
Have you wrestled during this time and like empty arena, or limited capacity?
I have wrestled. Yeah, I wrestled a show out in Jersey a couple of months ago. It was an outdoor show, which is fine.
Yeah.
It was a couple hundred people. They did a great job of following protocol and stuff. Yeah. So, it was fine. I just did an autograph thing out in LA 2 or 3 weeks ago. So, traveling with COVID has been, a little challenging, but, business as usual, really, as long as you, follow the regulations. You have to wear a mask like the whole time once you hit the airport. So it's a little rough as far as you have to breathe and so forth. It's a little annoying, but it is for our safety and others. So it's it is what it is, man. It's what we're living through right now.
This podcast, music, sports, and comedy. So we've talked to musicians, athletes like yourself, and like stand-up comedians, right, and we're getting everybody's different background and everybody's different story and everybody's different heartaches and everybody's different types of, like what they like. Comedians are doing rooftop shows. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean it's been rough, especially for stand up because, they're confined to such small clubs. It's really hit the comedy scene rough. I can't imagine, and I don't see it getting any better anytime soon. Unfortunately, it's gonna be rough out there for another couple months, man. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, the second wave seems to be, as they predicted, start in the fall and just get worse, and like Archie said, Archie and I are in a local band, and we haven't played a show in a year.
Oh, wow.
And some of the like we said, the comedians and even before that, like we talked to a lot of MMA fighters, and luckily the UFC was able to much like WWE has stayed open during this.
Right.
Found a way to get past it, so it's good. But it's scary.
Yeah, I mean it's rough when this is all you have, right, to feed your family. This is unprecedented in our lifetimes, and you really don't, you really have to get creative in finding ways to trickle any sort of income. Since I don't have any other source, I try to do like wrestling seminars via Zoom and. Just all kinds of little creative ways to make a couple bucks, but still, you can't compare that to a weekend of shows and traveling and making real money. So it's really rough, and it's not just hitting us as far as performers; it's hitting the clubs and the local venues. Yeah. I saw a GoFundMe page for the ECW Arena, world famous ECW Arena, which has it's been remodeled and it's a beautiful venue now. They're asking for like $43,000 to just keep the lights on because they haven't been able to run shows. Not only do they run wrestling, but they run concerts and comedy, all kinds of conventions, all kinds of stuff, Comic Cons and so forth. So it's not just hitting us as performers; it's hitting clubs and venues and restaurants, bars, you name it. So it's rough, and it's going to be quite interesting how it starts to trickle back and how it's going to happen. So we'll see, man. We'll see.
All right, so let's go back to the beginning. You sure. Trained with the Hart brothers, and I've seen some over the years some interviews that you've given saying that it was the Hart brothers by pretty much by name, but kind of like Lance Storm was like the one that really like kind of took over. They were only there like maybe 1 day or 2 days a week.
Right. Yeah. Pretty much. I went there the summer of '92. I was 18 years old, and it was literally, I was a kid going out into the middle of nowhere, Canada, to train to be a wrestler. Huh. And it was, I tell you what, it was probably one of the most grueling things I've ever done in my life, just from the physicality and just everything that you were required to do. And a lot of it, I come to find out and understand later, it wasn't so much even to teach you how to be a wrestler, but to see if you had what it took to become a wrestler. So they would have you, running miles and miles and doing all kinds of drills and really testing your will and your attitude. And, it was probably the hardest thing I've ever done, but also at the end of the day, one of the most rewarding, so.
Now obviously it's a famous wrestling school, but what drew you up to Canada?
It was actually just, it was real simple. 92, I was 1 year out of high school. I was working at a grocery store, just bagging groceries. And on my break, I went to the newsstand. You get like 15 minutes. I went to read one of the old Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazines. And, there's no internet back then. And still in wrestling, it was a bit more kayfabe than it is today. There wasn't like a lot of indie federations and organizations out there. So I really didn't know anywhere to go or how to even, get started in this. It was still a very closed circle. And, I saw this advertisement that said Hart Brothers Pro Wrestling Camp, Dare to Be Great. And it had, a bunch of phone numbers for Bruce Hart. And, I gave it a shot. I called and I spoke to Bruce Hart, and I saved up my money at the grocery store and, couple months later, I went to Calgary in the summer. I trained there from the beginning of July till the end of August, 8 weeks. And that was it, man. I became a pro wrestler. I went back. I came home for a short period of time, went back out there and had my first pro match, October 16th, 1992 in Calgary. So that's really the only thing that drove me there was it was the first thing I kind of saw to be a pro wrestler, because I'd always wanted to do it. That was kind of my dream and my passion. I just didn't know how. So yeah, it was like I saw that opportunity and I took it, and here we are almost 30 years later,
Wow, that's awesome. So
yeah.
From there, you get your first pro match, and I guess you wrestled, I guess back then, I guess it was still called Indies, but how did you get your introduction into WWF at the time?
Okay. I wrestled from October 16th, 92 till probably right before Christmas out in Calgary. We wrestled once a week out there in a small promotion called Rocky Mountain Pro Wrestling. During those 10 matches, I wrestled Lance Storm, Chris Jericho, a lot of up and coming guys that you see today. Luther from AEW, he was also up there as well. And so you got to there was a lot of talent up there. So I got to work with all of those guys. And, kind of the money ran dry. I wasn't making anything. I was pretty much, wrestling for free and putting up the rings and so forth, paying your dues kind of a thing. So I came home and, then just kind of started from scratch, really trying to meet people and go to the little shows that were around at the time. So one day I just got the balls to go visit a WWF at the time house show that was like 30 minutes from my hometown in New Haven, Connecticut. And I just went right back there. You were always taught to bring your gear. So I brought my bag and stuff. And I spoke to a gentleman named Tony Gurria, former tag team champion, great wrestler. And he was one of the officials there. And I introduced myself, told them who I was, who trained me, which of course helps because Brett and Owen were with the company at the time, So, they welcomed me and let me, sit in to watch the show, which was really cool of them, So when the show ended, I went to thank Tony Gurria and say goodbye. And, I appreciated everything. And he basically said, well, look, we're starting this new show in Manhattan in a couple of months called Monday Night Raw. We're going to need extras, like enhancement talent, jobbers, stuff like that. And he goes, would you be interested? Because I live so close to Manhattan. And I'm like, well, yeah, of course, it's a great opportunity. So that's really how I got started. My first match, I believe, was in like March, and I wrestled Lex Luger on live Monday Night Raw, and
that's awesome.
That's how it started. Yeah.
So that had to feel surreal, and let the listeners know, like you said, wrestling was much more guarded then. It seemed like
it was, yeah.
You didn't know somebody on the inside. You weren't getting in. It wasn't like today where there's the internet and you can message people. And I think that's what I think people forget is how closed off it was. Like you said, how kayfabe was alive and what have you.
Yeah, it was a whole different animal, and in a way, it was almost better. Now it's almost like with the internet, as wonderful as the internet is, as far as reaching people and communication and all that. Back then, it was like just very difficult. You had to kind of get lucky in meeting someone in the business. Either that or you had to really just going to be a stalker in a way and try to get yourself out there and get known, where today anybody that has $2,000 can go to a wrestling school, and it's almost like a pay to play thing where, if you have $2,000, you can come to my school and, and then I'll put you on shows, etc. If you keep paying, your wrestling dues, your fees, monthly or whatever. So it's honestly, when I got into the business, there were probably 200 full-time jobs in North America for pro wrestlers, and probably 300 or 400 pro wrestlers. So it wasn't that bad of a ratio, but still it was, there were not, the shortage of jobs weren't there. There were, a good amount of full-time jobs in wrestling, comparatively speaking to wrestlers. Now it's like you have, it's like the fans are wrestlers. Everybody's a wrestler. Yeah. Everybody's a worker. Like my wife and I'm like kind of joke about it when we do appearances. It's like anybody that could buy a pair of spandex and wrestling boots is a wrestler now. Everybody's a worker, which kind of kills the business because those are people that are fans that, not everybody is meant to be a wrestler. Not everybody is 6'2", 6'3", 250 pounds. And I know that's, a lot of wrestlers are much smaller. I get it. But what I'm trying to say is wrestling at a high level is elite athletes. Sure. Especially in the WWE and with indie wrestling and the way it's kind of been bastardized. It's like, everybody can run a show. If you could buy a ring, if you could buy a pair of tights, you could put on a show in front of 10 people. And they call it pro wrestling, which really doesn't do our business any justice. And it takes away from what we actually do. Because, and there's a lot of people out there calling what they do pro wrestling, but in reality, it's not what we were taught. So it's kind of been a double-edged sword with social media. It's like we've let too many of them in, so to speak. Yeah,
that's actually
in on it.
That's actually kind of one of the questions I had. It was something like, how do you feel like the wrestling game? How do you feel it changed? At least like 20 years ago compared to now.
Yeah, it changed like that. Look, there's a famous story. And I won't do it justice, but Hulk Hogan in the late 1970s, I think like 79 or something, he was a big dude out in Tampa, Florida, bouncing at clubs, and he wanted to get into the wrestling business. And he went to, he found somebody at a local wrestling gym in Florida, especially in Tampa. There was a, Florida Championship Wrestling, ton of people out there that wrestled. And here's Hulk Hogan, 6'5", he was an Adonis, 270 pounds. He went to Hiro Matsuda, who's a famous Japanese wrestler, and he asked him to train him. And back then they mostly did like one-on-one training or two-on-one training, with you and a couple other guys, but not like these school settings. And, to see if Hogan had the balls, Hiro Matsuda, who was an older gentleman at the time, roughed Hogan up and broke his leg.
Damn.
And, Matsuda was like, well, I figure this guy isn't coming back. Lo and behold, a couple months after, he recovered, he healed up, whatever the amount of time was, Hogan came back. And that kind of was how it was. They would try to almost test you to see if you were fit for it, if you were made for it, if you had the balls to do it, if you had the heart. Yeah. That was an extreme, that's extreme, but it's kind of how the Hearts were. Like they would give you like crazy drills and make you run X amount of miles and take these bumps and just, almost try to make you quit. I remember 12 guys came into our camp in 92 and only 2 graduated and left. And I was one of them. They'd driven everybody else out by that time. So it was a lot more exclusive on who they let into the business. They meaning people that were in it, people that ran shows, people that were part of the pro wrestling community. And that's been the big difference in the past 20-something years is where there was maybe 300 or 400 people full-time in the wrestling industry. Now there's probably 2,000 to 3,000. Yeah. And, it just bastardizes everything and just, it doesn't do the business itself. And actually the good talent that's out there doesn't do anybody any favors,
See, I feel, and again, growing up in the 80s and, getting into wrestling in like, I'll say 83, 84, right? It was the bigger guys. It was, a lot of, basic, maybe like rest hold and clotheslines and body slam, that kind of stuff, right? So I feel like the people that are doing it now, maybe on indies or kids coming up, are more athletic. But I feel like even though they're more athletic, they're just the story. They're not telling a story, or it doesn't connect the same to me because, like you said, anybody's kind of doing it.
Yeah, look, the guys and gals doing it today, especially the ones that do it on a high level, they're tremendous, and they do things I could only imagine doing. But yeah, look, everything changes, the business changes, but what doesn't change is to me is just who you are when you are able to, regardless of your size or style, to hold an audience and to entertain an audience. And, for every, like Chris Jericho, for example, Chris Jericho is not a big guy. He's 5'10", maybe 220 pounds. And he's been probably one of the most successful pro wrestlers with a 30+ year career. That's a storybook career as good as anybody. And then you got guys like the Young Bucks who have had tremendous success, and just starting to kind of come up. Both are successful, but both come from different kinds of schools. And I guess the point being that, there's a place for everyone. It's just kind of finding the niche that, in the path you want to take. Because at the end of the day, anybody, regardless of size or stature, if you could tell a good story and if you could work and sell, you will always be successful in this business. I mean, I was never, even though I had a couple of main event runs in ECW, I was a mid-card guy in WWE, but I always had a job. And if you're reliable, if you're talent, and, Shawn Michaels and Razor used to always tell me this, cream rises to the top. And if you're good, regardless of how you get booked, you'll always have a job. You'll always earn a paycheck. And that's still true to this day,
Yeah. If you come in, even with all the talent, if you come in with like a shit story, will somebody help you out? Will there other people out there that will help you get a background story and develop you as a character? Or no, you need to have it all? Some people will try to help you, but usually those people, unfortunately, in this business, don't have your best interest in mind. It certainly was like that when I was coming up. It's usually best to just have a good, it's good to be rounded in the basics of wrestling. I always say this to anybody trying to get in. It's like you should be as good of a grappler, a pro wrestler, and know your basics like the back of your hand, which unfortunately a lot of these young kids, they can't even lock up. And and people's like, yeah, well, what does locking up mean? That's not, he just because he can't lock up doesn't mean he can't do a killer moonsault. Well, I'll tell you about that. I was Aldo Montoya getting ready to go out for my match during like a Raw taping. And these two musclehead guys were going out before me for their tryout. We were in the gorilla position, and Vince McMahon and Pat Patterson were there looking at these guys getting a tryout. And, we're watching, and they go out there, they look impressive. They lock up. All of a sudden, Pat Patterson gets up off of his seat and walks out the gorilla position. Vince gets up and yells, "Pat, where the hell are you going? We brought these guys in for a tryout. Well, what's up?" And Pat yells at Vince, "Vince, they can't fucking lock up, man. They can't work." And that was it. That they was gone. First thing they saw, and they could tell, you can't fucking lock up, dude. You can't work, and you don't belong here. Jesus. And sometimes it's the basics that really, because you can teach people how to work, how to perform, how to tell stories, but you can't teach people the basics. Yeah. Which are, fundamental. It's like any fundamental. It's like, you can't make it on an NBA team if you can't dribble a basketball. And unfortunately, we let a lot of that shit go these days. Because there's guys out there that I see on AEW and such that are uber talented, and they could do tons of dives and so forth. But, they could barely chain wrestle, or barely, grab a proper headlock, or even run the ropes, And I know it sounds very trivial, but it really marks, the best wrestlers in the world are the guys that have the best basics. Guys like Bret Hart, he was flawless with his basics. The way his grappling game is just the way he worked. Shawn Michaels, those guys. That's not rocket science. That's not anything flashy. That's just good, solid basics. And if you can't get that down, then you have no business doing flips and dives and, doing triple indies when you can't do an arm drag.
Talk about you mentioned Pat Patterson. Talk about him for a second. Unfortunately, we lost him last week. But that was somebody that you were obviously in direct contact with when you had your run as Aldo Montoya coming into WWF.
Yeah, Pat was a very big influence in my life and in my career. The way I actually got involved with Pat on a one-on-one basis, he was Vince's right-hand man, and I live in Connecticut. WWE's headquarters are in Stamford, Connecticut, and they were bringing in Brian Lee, who was a guy that looked like Undertaker's friend, to do the fake Undertaker gimmick. I don't know if you guys remember that.
Oh yeah.
In 1994. So they had booked Brian Lee to come to the office. They set up a ring at the warehouse. There was no performance center back then. So me and Mark Undertaker, we worked with Brian Lee the entire week, Monday through Friday. So, Brian could learn how Taker did his moves to kind of mimic his mannerisms, etc. Friday was the last day of rehearsal, so to speak, and they did a complete dress rehearsal where Brian Lee was in the Taker gear, the makeup, the hair, the whole 9 yards, and Mark, Pat, and Vince sat there on a bench or whatever and watched it. I was just a crash test dummy, but nonetheless. So we go through it, we do the whole thing, and that was it. Pat Patterson comes over, thanked me, but he was impressed, and he started asking me some questions. And he's like, "Well, who trained you?" And I said, "Well, Pat, the Hart brothers did." And he was like, "Oh, okay, really? You trained with, Bruce and so forth?" I said, "Yes, I did, sir," whatever. And all of a sudden, he asked me a question that was kind of out of left field. He goes, "Well, what nationality are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm Portuguese, sir." And he goes over and yells at Vince, "Hey, Vince, this guy's Portuguese." And I thought, well, that's a little weird, but whatever. And Vince kind of popped, and I was like, okay. He kept going on and on. He goes, "Do you happen to speak Portuguese?" I said, "Well, yes, sir, I do. My family immigrated here in 1970. I was born here in 73. So they didn't speak very good English when they got to this country. So, yeah, I learned how to, Portuguese, I learned how to speak first before English, matter of fact." And he really popped and, again, called out to Vince and said, "Yeah, this kid speaks Portuguese." Long story short, they were looking for a guy to fill the Aldo Montoya role. Aldo was not created for me. It had already been created, and I just happened to be in the right place at the right time and fit the role.
Okay.
So that's, and something as simple as that was how I got my start, in the big time, really,
Awesome. That's fucking great little story right there.
Yeah.
And is that right that they at first envisioned that character as a soccer player?
Yeah, it is. They had a creative department, and they were coming up with real shit characters.
Fucking kicking soccer balls or something.
Yeah. I was a soccer player, and I was number 23 with long hair. But they didn't end up going with it, which was cool. And in the Aldo character, the way this was, the original Aldo guy, the guy that you guys saw, looked really cool on paper. They had the art department have this guy I looked like a Power Ranger. I had like big Road Warrior style shoulder pads and, long flowing hair and, coming out of the mask. And I looked really badass. And then when I finally made my debut and they handed me my outfit like an hour or two before I had to go out there, the outfit looked nothing like it. The mask looked nothing like it.
Yeah.
So, because that's how things were back then. It wasn't really like what you would imagine. You would think, you're going to get this badass gear and they're going to make all this stuff for you. A lot of people don't understand, like, we were responsible as independent contractors to get our own gear made. Like, the office would initially pay for the first two outfits that you got for whatever gimmick they wanted you to play, but then afterwards you were directly responsible for having someone make your gear and paying out of pocket for it and whatever it is and however fancy you wanted it to be. So you really had control of what you wore and so to speak, and how you were presented. But unfortunately, back in those days, man, they only had two seamstresses. And, most of the time, if your name wasn't Shawn Michaels, who had a different outfit for every pay-per-view, you weren't getting your shit done. You know what I mean? It's almost like the pecking order. So I got my first two Aldo outfits, and that's all I ever really got because, those guys came first, the Undertakers, the Shawns, the Bretts, the list goes on. And then when they had, they found a minute, they would do my stuff or Bob Holly's or, somebody like that. So, it was a different time back then.
So I guess that explains Adrian Adonis's scarf.
Probably, brother. Probably. I wouldn't doubt it.
So now does the office have the final say? So like you can get your own gear and shit made. Obviously yours looked like the colors of the Portuguese flag.
Right.
But do they like have a say of like, because I would imagine like now, and again, your character was specific, obviously from Portugal, but like wrestlers now, like I feel like everyone wants to wear black. Like does the office like say, okay, hey, you can only wear this color. You can't.
Yeah, I mean, look, they definitely they do have a lot of say in what is done, but but again, it's really it comes down to who you are. It's very weird, man. And I can't even, I could try to do it justice by explaining how it's done, but it's just so weird. And it's so out there. Like one day, you're the flavor of the week and you're getting attention from the writers. And then sometimes if you fall out of favor, you could go to the WWE machine and not be talked to, literally spoken to by anybody in the office or in charge for a month.
That's wild.
Jesus.
They literally hand you a booking sheet every 2 to 3 weeks. And if your name is on the sheet, which is like, you'd get a booking sheet and they'll have, Dallas, Texas, Chicago, Illinois, whatever, the towns. Yeah. And you see where your name is on those towns, and they'll give you plane tickets that coincide with that. And that's it. That's it. You get paid, you get your money, and you get your tickets. And, if they don't have anything to tell you, you just show up to the town, look at your name on the board, and go from there. So a lot of times you were flying completely blind, not knowing what was going on, not knowing what their plans were for you. It was very, very nerve-wracking stuff. And you kind of knew, it's like if I went up to Vince or if I went up to anybody in charge and asked them, a stupid question, who knows, you might even get heat for it. Yeah. So a lot of times you just had to keep your mouth shut, do what you were told, and hope for the best. Just go out there and work as hard as you can, and as long as your name was on the booking sheet, you were golden. But it was a very rough way to kind of work and do business, and literally week to week, television taping to television taping, you didn't know where you were going to wrestle, what you were going to be doing, what the intentions of the office were. God forbid storylines, and even when they did put me in storylines with a Jerry Lawler, or I did a couple of Aldo storylines with Jeff Jarrett where I beat him in a non-title match for the IC title, and then had a title match later on. I didn't know about that till about an hour or two before I got to the building.
Shit. So
it was very much just, get there and be ready, and they'll come to you when they need something, So it was not for the faint at heart, man. If you were insecure in any way, if you had hang-ups and stuff, you're dead. That's why a lot of people, couldn't hang, including myself. It was very, very scary. You're relying on this to make a living, and you don't know from 1 minute to the next if you're even going to be booked. So It was just it was a rough place to work, and I guess it's changed a little bit now, which is a good thing. But back then, man, it was it weeded out the weak kind of a thing, It really was a place for alpha males, just like how Vince wanted it,
Yeah.
Because that's a Vince thing.
Like you said, and from what I remember, I felt like you were featured on television a lot back then. I would say 94, 95. And it was probably because you have that attitude, of being dependable, and most importantly at that time, you could go in the ring. So I think that's probably, you think that's what the why Vince always, I felt like you're always on TV once you debuted.
Yeah. Yeah, they were very good to me. I was very well liked, and I was very young. And I think at that time they understood, and I think as part of the reason for the mask is that they understood that was not going to be my last gimmick. That wasn't going to be where I made, that's not what's going to make me famous. Yeah. That was there to kind of, for me to learn, for me to kind of get a couple of years in the system, almost like, a rookie quarterback that comes out of college, sitting behind a great quarterback, kind of learning the ropes. That was kind of what that was for, in my opinion, was kind of just learn as much as I can, be active, and be in the system for a couple of years before I got my shot. But unfortunately, it didn't work out that way because things started to change. In '96, Razor and Kevin Nash, who I was traveling with at the time, they went to WCW, and also myself, I was starting to get a little frustrated at lack of opportunity, because I noticed that I was having better and better matches at the house shows, really head and shoulders above a lot of the talent that was getting featured. And, Kevin and Scott were like, dude, Bischoff's paying guys. He goes, we can get you a job down here and you can make double what you're making.
Yeah.
So I went into the office, had a meeting with Vince, and I said, Vince, I'm appreciative of everything you've done for me, but you're not doing much with me. I said, if you could, I'd like my release. And Vince said no. He goes, we've invested too much time and money into you, not to mention it would be a bad look to have another one of my guys jump over. So instead, he sent me to Memphis, which was like the developmental back then, to learn how to work as a heel. So I was there for 6 weeks working Jerry Lawler's territory.
Okay.
And then after that, it's like ECW was down there doing an angle with Jerry Lawler, and Chris Candido, who I was good friends with, was also down there, and he was working as Paul Heyman's right-hand man. And Chris is like, dude, you should come work for us. And I was like, well, I'd love to, but I got a contract. He goes, let Paul work it out with Vince. And that's what happened. He did. Vince gave me a conditional release over to ECW and to Paul. And I went to work for Paul, and the rest is history.
Huh.
Yeah.
I remember when I first saw you in ECW, and I'm like, oh shit, okay, here we go. Because I obviously,
Right.
And that's when I'd have to like stay up and listen to like maybe on a Sunday night and maybe hear like a little backstage stuff, and I'm like, holy shit! I'm like, and then you come out with a brand new character, Justin, and I'm like, whoa, okay, I'm like, this is different. I'm like they're onto something. Did you feel that click right away?
I did. I did. It was just so different in ECW. There was something going on there. You could tell the minute you walked out into the arena. The fans were so amazing. They were so hungry for wrestling. It was a great time to be in that company because like it was making superstars. Like if you wrestled, it was like the cool place to work. It was almost like it was like punk rock or something. And it's like if you were on ECW, you became cool. And I got a great opportunity, and I made a good name for myself, which of course then kind of spiked your interest all over the place. WCW had offered me money after a year or so in ECW. I turned them down. Paul was paying me great money to wrestle 2 nights a week. I was making $150,000 to wrestle on a Friday and Saturday, as opposed to being on the road all the time. So I was making great money wrestling, close to home, and working in a main event program. So it was just a wonderful time, both in the business and for me personally and professionally, until the business kind of went sideways and Vince bought out WCW and ECW folded. And I was lucky, as a matter of fact, to get another opportunity with the WWE in 2001 when ECW did go out of business. And I did X Factor with X-Pac. So, I was lucky to always, at that time, always have a job,
Yeah.
Now, was that you hear stories? Yes, but I think now the prevailing thought is so Vince was funding ECW for a period. No, or
I still don't know. You hear yes, you hear no. Everybody has their own story. All I know is that for me, it's all I can only speak for myself because everybody has a different tale. All I know is that they did have a working relationship. Yes. I don't know. Did Vince let Paulie borrow money? Yes. But did he own it or run it? No. I think it was a lot less nefarious than that. I think Vince certainly helped Paul keep ECW afloat. If Paul needed a loan for, let's say, $20,000 to make payroll that week, it was there, and they'd work it out because it was good for Vince. Because a lot of times, Paul would make wrestlers that would, go on to be big stars in the WWE. So they had this kind of cool little arrangement, and and even with the when we went on TNN, which was then going to be Spike TV, a lot of people say that was ECW went on there first to kind of test the waters for WWE to have Raw on there a year later. So, Vince and Paul worked very closely together, and right when ECW went out of business, Paul Heyman was there too. So, he always landed on his feet. So yeah, they always worked together. Now, to what extent, I don't know.
Yeah.
One of my biggest regrets, as you know, living so close to Philly, I mean, not so close, but a couple of hours drive, being a lifelong wrestling fan, is not going to an ECW show at the ECW arena.
Yeah.
So talk about the vibe in that arena, because I mean,
Sure.
on television it came off like this is the most exciting shit going on.
Oh, it was. It really was. It was intimidating at some times too, because those fans, if you went out there and if you screwed up or messed up a spot, they would, they would eat your shit. I mean, they would completely they would fucking bust your balls and all kinds of chants, and you fucked up and all worse stuff than that. Yeah. So it was intimidating, but also they were the best fans on the planet. It was probably the coolest place ever to work. I never remember having a bad experience at the ECW arena. We put about 2,500 people every 3 weeks in that building, and they were hardcore, man. They came. They were part of they weren't just an audience. They were part of the show.
Yeah,
that's how special the ECW fans were. They were as much a reason for ECW being ECW than anything else. I mean, they really were, they were part of the success, and they were part of the show. And it was a pleasure to work for them, because if you didn't get over with the ECW crowd, you didn't have a chance.
Yeah.
You didn't have a chance. But if you did, you became one of their own, and you were always good, And I was very lucky. They just respected hard work. They just wanted you to go out there and work hard and, give them the passion that they are giving you. And I feel that that's not a big price to pay. Just go out there and give them everything you got. And that's what we're supposed to do, right?
Yep.
And, it worked out great for me. And, to this day, man, that's the place we built, and I'm very proud of it,
And just, again, obviously it may have felt different as you were living it and going through it, but from a fan's perspective, I felt like you were over, from the minute that you debuted there, and, there's no higher honor than someone saying, okay, you're going to be our champion, and they put the belt on. And that
yeah.
I mean, that says a lot about how Paul and or the company felt about you.
Yeah, I agree. And, it's not like I tried not to take it like from a Mark point of view. I didn't win a belt. It's not real. but what is real is that they're putting a responsibility on you to not only main event every show and pay-per-view, but, to be the face of the company, to represent the company at the highest degree and at the highest level. So that's what it really meant to me. It meant that, a company like ECW, which was, part of the big three, there was WCW, ECW, and WWE, and I was top dog in that company. And, that says something. At some point in 2000, I was, one of the top 5 in the world. So that to me meant the world. It meant that I did something special in this business, and I certainly worked my ass off for it, and I'll never forget it. It was great times, and for such a small little building in such a shithole corner of the world. Because if you guys went there, man, it's literally in a little corner of the world where you probably think you took a wrong turn, and you're going to get jumped instead of going to a major wrestling show. It really was something crazy, something special. And, what was cool too about ECW was, that's the only place in America where you can go and see Japanese talent, Yeah. I wrestled the great Sasuke there, who's a Japanese legend, and so many other guys. I mean, they had Onita there from FMW. Muda was there, but actually I worked with Muda there in ROH. But nonetheless, this little place in South Philadelphia was at the time, now you get Japanese wrestlers everywhere in America. But back then we were really one of the only promotions that were bringing in guys of that caliber, and it was just a unique melting pot. And it was really like the mecca of like real pro wrestling, like the sheets and, smart fans and stuff. It was like the place to be,
I feel like that's been a lot of companies have tried to recreate that, and it's just like that's like a once in a lifetime thing. I feel, WWE tried to recreate it with ECW, but I don't think something like that's ever going to be recreated because it was just so organic and so real.
It was right place, right time, which, it was a lot like my career, but, at the time, it was a lot of firsts. Nobody else was bringing in Japanese stars. We took a guy like Terry Funk, and who was a legend in this business, and became relevant again by, at his age of 48, which isn't that old. Hell, I'm 47 now. And back then, I used to look at Terry Funk as an old man, when in reality, he was my age when he was in ECW. But still, it's like we just landed on a gold mine, and we realized, more importantly, that fans cared about the same stuff we cared about. We acknowledged to the fans, the smart fans, so to speak, that, we like these guys too. And it was like our own little geek convention of, we like these things. We appreciate this style and these wrestlers and this kind of stuff. And we could all come here every 3 weeks to South Philadelphia and kind of share in this, in these common likes and stuff. And that being pro wrestling, and also ECW, which was so cool, and which will again never happen, it was a stopping place for guys in between companies. We had Stone Cold Steve Austin there in between his stint in WCW and WWE. We had Mick Foley. Guys like Bam Bam Bigelow were there. You name it. With Brian Pillman, Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, all these guys, they stopped through and had, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was a place where else could you see that on an indie show?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it was very special. And that it wasn't necessarily just because of ECW. The situation and the way wrestling was then was also what made it so special, because it was a unique environment that was, kind of on the cusp of being what it is today. More smart fans and more fans appreciating, the styles of Japan and Lucha Libre and all other kinds of stuff, hardcore wrestling and so forth, that kind of, made it into what became, of course, ECW.
I feel like watching, and looking at Heyman during those times I felt like he was like a really good coach who always got the best out of his team and his players.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I always say that, Paul Heyman he wasn't necessarily the best booker in the world, but he was the best motivator in the world, because he took somebody like myself, and he knew, kind of what I felt, and he felt like, probably PJ feels like he'd been wronged by the WWF, and he feels like probably that he's been, this, that, and he can offer, you know what I mean? He knew how to talk to each individual, because each individual had their own story. Shane Douglas, for example, he knew how to work Shane Douglas and to motivate Shane to be the best Shane he was, because obviously the shit he went through in WCW and in WWF as the Dean, and he just kind of was wasn't the best booker, was the best motivator, and really made you believe in yourself. And that's what Paul's best talent was.
And obviously that's much, I'm sure people always ask you to compare and contrast working for Vince and working for Paul. Obviously they're two very different people. From the fans' perspective, it feels like if Vince didn't create you, then you're never going to, very few guys get to the top if he didn't create them.
Right. Very true. And it'll always be, I think, Vince got bored with guys that he didn't create. He didn't fully understand it. I remember being part of the original One Night Stand, and I went out during, I did a run-in the Lance Storm Chris Jericho match where I hit Chris with the kendo stick. And I remember being at the gorilla position for that, and, kind of hearing Vince talk. There was a package, a pre-match package of the Impact players and all this other stuff. And Vince was asking questions to Heyman and to other people that were watching it on the monitors and the headsets. Vince had no idea of what was going on. and then he also had no interest. He was just kind of like, you could tell he was lost and he didn't get it. And again, that's because it was something he did not create. He did not have his fingerprints on it. Therefore, he couldn't understand it. And as great as Vince McMahon has been in this business and for this business, that is also his biggest downfall is, in my opinion, and I'm being a little bold in saying this, but I think that's his biggest downfall, especially in adapting to what wrestling is today. And, you know, him being responsible really for the main catalyst and the main shows in pro wrestling, is that he just does not show an interest on what pro wrestling is in the, you know what I mean, for the smarts, for the underbelly. He just, you know, he's just completely disconnected and disenfranchised. And unfortunately, that's where he always loses people. And he's lost touch, unfortunately, with that. And, you know, I think that's where hopefully AEW will pick up, you know, that, because right now, man, wrestling is going through a time where it is super uncool to like pro wrestling. That's always been something. I do a podcast with Vince Russo where we review AEW, and the numbers, you know, Vince Russo's a big number, you know, cruncher. And it's pretty much on any given night where there's SmackDown, Raw, AEW, NXT, etc. You know, there's about 1.5 to 2 million people. That's SmackDown, Raw, and the combo of NXT, AEW. It's about what the numbers are. So there's about 2 to 3 million people that'll watch any one of those shows or combination of those shows. And so that's really, you know, if you compare it to the Attitude Era, where at one point 10 to 12 million people in between Raw and Nitro were watching on a Monday night, wrestling has become super uncool. You know, and the numbers prove it. And I think the WWE has such an opportunity to, because they have the best wrestlers in the world. I mean, let's face it, they may not be being presented maybe as fans would like to, but pound for pound, they have some of the best workers in the world. If you let Seth Rollins or you know, Drew McIntyre loose in another promotion, look what happened to John Moxley. You know what I mean? It's like, I think if Vince were to let go of his way of doing business in the WWE and being so stringent upon talent, I think it would open up a lot of different possibilities, because right now wrestling is just, to me, it's uncool. Like if you talk to like buddies of mine, or, you know, of anybody's, if they're not wrestling fans and you mention pro wrestling, they kind of laugh and, you know, they think it's kind of corny, right? Where back in the day, dude, everybody liked Steve Austin. Everybody loved The Rock. Everybody loved Goldberg. It was, I mean, it was something else. And I think until we could figure out what the fans want and how we can bring fans back and how we can make wrestling cool again, because unfortunately wrestling is just not cool, you know. It's like a weird little subculture in the WWE, and that to me is a huge problem. And I just hope that Vince lets go enough to allow it to fix itself, because they certainly have the talent and they certainly have backstage personnel to make it happen. It's just a matter of, will Vince let it happen?
So I'm just curious, out of all the battles that you withstood in the ring, has there been a time that a wrestler possibly overstepped his boundary? Has there ever been, you know, went too far? And because I know there's like a mutual respect that you have to have for each other. You're doing a dance there.
Yeah, no, I never had a problem. No,
yeah.
I'm blessed in that way. Nobody ever overstepped. I was always respectful of everyone I worked with, and vice versa. You know, I never had one problem, and that's great. I'm grateful for it. You know, I guess that means I did something right. You know, I was always very humble, knew my role, knew how to. You know, I showed up to do business. You know, and I never, never had a problem. So that's a good thing.
What do you think 47-year-old Justin would tell 23-year-old Justin, 23 PJ? What do you think you would say? Hey man, sit down. I gotta spit some shit at you for a second.
Save your money.
Yeah.
Because one thing that killed the business was, well, it didn't just kill the business, it killed us. 2001, at the beginning of 2001, there were 3 wrestling companies.
Okay.
And 6 months later, there was only one. And hundreds of people lost jobs over that. And, I figured I'm 26, I'm 27. I'll always have I haven't even gotten my big break yet, and even though I did get lucky enough to find WWE for a second run, I certainly didn't think that by 2006, 2007, my best years, at least having a job, would be behind me, barely 30. I wish I would have saved my money. I wish I would have done things a little differently, and just kind of prepared for the future, because when you're at the top of the game, you never see it as coming to an end. And, and you never see the business imploding on you like it did. I mean, it was literally the Titanic when WCW was bought out and ECW folded, where guys were literally losing their livelihoods. And you went from having maybe 300 full-time jobs in pro wrestling to then maybe 100 just by WWE, and they're the only game in town, right?
Yeah.
So, that's people losing their homes. I certainly had to sell my home and so forth. So it was, I would say, save my money.
Gotcha.
That'd be the biggest.
Yeah.
So you got your second run back in 01-ish, right? 01 or 02, the invasion angle. When X Factor, when they teamed up with X-Pac, by far one of my favorite teams of all time, and I feel like they left a ton of money on the table with you guys. They did, and that was because of the invasion angle. They cut everything short because Pac was going to go with the WWF, and I was going to go with the stupid ECW WCW alliance, and it killed it all right in the middle. Yeah, that's that it was a weird time for wrestling, and again,
it really was. Yeah.
Beyond the first Monday night when you see the simulcast and Shane's on Nitro, like to a fan you're like, holy shit. But like you said, you don't realize what goes into that, and how now there's going to be no more competition, and competition is the best thing for wrestling, and the people that are going to lose their jobs, and now it's people fighting for a smaller piece of the pie, and it was the undoing, I believe, of wrestling.
It was, and it really it took wrestling a good decade to kind of come back from, and really reality, not until AEW debuted on TNT did we really get another wrestling promotion. TNA, although they've been around, I really don't consider them anything compared to an AEW. Until AEW showed up on TNT, there really was nobody else. So hopefully now with what's going on in AEW and Impact, there's a little bit of competition. And once again, I just hope that wrestling in some way, shape, or form can become cool again, could become something that kids look, back in the day, man, when Stone Cold and Rock were coming out, man, my ECW shirts were sold in Hot Topics, in the mall. Stone Cold Steve Austin shirts were sold in the mall. We need that again, and hopefully that AEW could help spark that. Hopefully WWE could help get just again compete and make something special, because we have probably the greatest group of talent out there today doing it in all these companies. So the talent's there. It's just we need that creative flow and those supposed creative geniuses to kind of make it happen, right?
It's funny. We'll see. It's you kind of get that Monday Night War kind of feeling when you watch on Wednesdays AEW.
Right.
NXT, right? And I feel like NXT, as soon as guys get good, they call them up to the main roster and don't do anything with them.
And then they don't do anything with them. Yeah. And that's a huge problem. And that's been a WWE problem for a very long time. And I don't see it getting fixed. I just saw a little bit of a takeover, NXT takeover. And, they're saying that, Adam Cole and those boys should go over to the main roster. And I'm like, dude, the minute that happens, they're done. They're done. So I don't know, man. I think they don't even really need to go to a main roster. I mean, I think they should just concentrate on making NXT its own thing, which they do, or they claim to do. I don't know. It's just weird. I think pro wrestling in the WWE right now is just very much they're bound almost by their own restrictions. Instead of making NXT their own cool thing, they're kind of bound by, labels like the main show and Raw and this and that, where it's just like, dude, we're on fucking Wednesday nights. Let's just do the best show we can and let's just be our own thing. Instead of worrying about who's getting called up where, because that's worthless to me. And it seems to be worthless to the product because nobody really benefits from it. So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, well, when you see that they call, guys up and they may do something at first, I think Kevin Owens is a good example. I mean, for a good portion of a year, they really didn't have much for him. And the guy, he can talk, he can wrestle, he can.
No, he's one of the best in the world.
And if they kept these guys and didn't promote them and kept them, like you said, that could be a whole company in and of itself, and a real contender, not just developmental, but.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. Hopefully they figure that out sooner than later, because it's there for the taking. And I think once AEW, especially with what they're doing now, starts to kind of, their numbers start to get a little better. And I anticipate that this week's AEW numbers are going to be a lot better than they have been. Not that they were bad, but I think they'll do way over 1 million. That things will start to tighten up because Vince always does good when someone's barking up his tree, so to speak. So we'll see.
Does any one match stick out for you in your mind? Like, wow, that was maybe one of my favorites that I've been in.
That I've been in? Geez. Not really, man. I always like me and Jerry Lynn. Anything we've done, those have always been really good. Also, I've had a couple of really good ones at the ECW Arena with Shane Douglas that aired on Hardcore TV. And I did a podcast earlier today. I do a ECW review show, and we reviewed Anarchy Rules 99, where I wrestled Sabu on pay-per-view for the first time. And that one is also, one of my favorites. But I've had so many. It's kind of like they all are kind of blurred, and I haven't seen them since I did them. So who really knows these days,
So talk about the podcast that you're doing. You say you do one with Vince Russo.
Yeah, I do one with Vince Russo. I do an AEW review show. We go live every Friday at 10 a.m. on Twitch, and then it's on his Patreon channel. And I also do this one with Pop. God, I don't even know the name, Pop Wrestling Culture, where we literally go back every week and review an ECW pay-per-view or ECW reunion or ECW arena shows that, before we went on pay-per-view, they had their, those named shows that they did. So we just go back once a week and review a show. We're in our 3rd week. We drop our Anarchy Rules pay-per-view show this coming weekend. So, yeah, I've just been, dude, my voice is hoarse. I've done 3 podcasts today, so I'm like the king of podcasting right now.
Well, we're not going to keep you much longer. I saw a trailer a couple years ago for a documentary you were doing.
Yes,
is that still in the works? That
is still in the works. We have obviously with COVID put it on hold, and hopefully in the next year we only have a couple days of shooting to finish it up, so hopefully it'll be out next year.
Awesome.
I can't wait.
Yep.
Where can everybody find you?
Sure. Follow me on my social media outlets: Twitter at PJ Polacco. Same thing with Instagram at PJ Polacco. Also, same thing with Facebook, although I don't do Facebook too much these days. But check out my Pro Wrestling Tees store at prowrestlingtees.com/Just-Incredible. I have over 20 designs, some really cool shirts. And I also have another company I'm doing business with called theindyconnection.com. So go on over to that, click in Just Incredible in the search engine, and you'll find all kinds of goodies, all things Just Incredible.
Awesome.
When this episode drops, we'll be sure that we'll blast all that out for you.
Absolutely. And I'll glad to promote it as well here on my end.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So thankful. I really appreciate you giving us the time.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, absolutely.
One of our favorites ever, and you've had an amazing career. You're still doing it.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hopefully, when this whole shit pandemic is done, we'll catch you in the tri-state area. Come out to a show and talk to you there.
Absolutely. Look forward to it, man. Thank you, guys, and have a wonderful night, man.
You just heard us talking to Justin Credible, one of the most hardcore, iconic wrestlers from back in the day, but still doing it. Everybody out there, if he happens to come to your area, go support, buy a shirt, say what's up, give him a pound, tell him not these two fucking guys sent you. With that being said, Rocco, what do you have to say to the people?
We interrupt this podcast to bring you some late-breaking news. This just in. Just in case you're wondering, you're just in time. If you just heard us talk to Justin Credible and you think it's regrettable how unforgettable it was when you jumped off the roof because you thought you could fly because you were on a medical edible, then you're listening to Not These Two Fucking Guys podcast.
We out.